right, happy Saturday. You're going to really want to watch this.
I'm so sorry. I feel that I wasted your whole day, but I am more sorry of what I'm going to do to your car.
Gloria, we're above that, but not everyone would be. You should put that beauty in your garage.
I don't have one.
Oh, really? Just out of curiosity, do you not have a garage because you converted it into the guest house where your grandson's currently showering?
What's your gate, mister?
I just find it interesting that you have a fully plumbed standalone dwelling on your property.
That's none of your business.
Even more peculiar, your grandson appears to live here, but judging by his t-shirt, he goes to Eden Mills High, an elite public school 12 miles outside of your district. Oh, maybe with the money you saved on private schools, you paid for the new two-sided brick fireplace I saw, which hasn't been legal since 1988.
Go, Phil, go.
Pull the sauce, Big Al. For Monday morning, the city's here with a bulldozer, and your grandson goes to a school with a metal detector.
How do you know all this? What are you, some kind of real estate agent?
Oh, he's a realtor. There is a difference somehow.
Okay, sir, there is a difference somehow. So we're going to talk about that today on the show. That's actually super interesting. It's one of my favorite clips on being a realtor. And, that's something I've been getting a lot of recently is, okay, what's the difference between a realtor, or some people mispronounce and say realtor, but it's realtor, versus an agent. And oftentimes in the villages, it gets confused. We take a look at those differences today, and also want to give you an update on what's going on in the real estate market. We're going to talk about that. And maybe some other things. I've got about 16 different differences between realtor and agent, maybe some more. We're going to talk about that. So with that, let's look at the marketplace. The marketplace over the last 5 to 6 weeks, we've seen many more go under contract versus new listings coming on the market. Now that's a big change from what we saw probably the first 10, 11 weeks of the year, where I think that the first couple of months, pretty much January, February, all the way through mid-March, the season really wasn't the season. It didn't feel that way. It felt like less than the season. And the homes that we were selling on MLS, and what I noticed also in Property Villages, their website, pretty much just a slow-ish type of season, very much a carryover from late last year. If you talk to most realtors, most agents around the country, October, November, December, pretty much a slow time, and not surprising based on the interest rates going up in record fashion over a 12-month period. So when we look at this, I think we're looking at 384 properties on MLS right now. That is significantly higher than what we saw 18 months ago, still less than the peak of what we saw about 2.5 years ago, just after COVID, where we saw 451 properties. So it seems like we're returning back to normal as far as inventory. And at least for the last 4 to 5 weeks, very much a normalish type of cadence as far as properties going under contract. So the market is a little bit brisker than what it was in February and January for sure. Still seeing a good number of properties come on the marketplace. I think we've plateaued. I think we were seeing some price drops, reductions, price improvements, whatever you want to call it. And I think we're seeing somewhat of a plateau. So for the people that are calling for a crash, I don't know that we've seen it. Depends on what you call a crash, because I think in certain cases, you could say the crash has already happened, because crash definitely means 20% reduction in pricing. And in certain cases, maybe we've come about maybe 10 to 12% off on the peak in pricing, although a lot of sellers are still, holding on to that price. And I think it's actually not doing them a favor by doing that. At the same time, I don't think that we need to be giving homes away either. So there's a happy balance. And I think that's what we're seeing. It's a fair tug of war in the marketplace right now. So let's look at the differences, right? Like there's a difference somehow, just like the Modern Family clip that we just showed. There is a difference between, being a realtor and an agent. But a lot of times people don't understand the differences between agent and realtor. And, specifically here in the Villages, I think there's some obvious differences that we're going to get into, some National Association of Realtor Code of Ethics differences, which you can actually Google and pull up yourself because it is public. The first thing I know is that, look, as realtors, we don't represent new construction. Okay, we don't represent new construction. We don't represent the developer. We always have some sort of representation of buyer or seller, and a lot of times the developer or the agent that is representing the developer is representing the developer, and not necessarily the seller or buyer. And that needs to be known. And I think it's fair for, if you're considering either an agent or a realtor, it's important to find out where they lie, right? Like, where is their representation? Who are they representing in the transaction? I think it's really, really important. It's a question to ask. The other thing that we have to realize is that as a realtor, we just represent resales, right? Homes that have been owned before. And Property Village's agents will represent either new construction, or they will represent resales. So they can do either one. So sometimes people think that there is some kind of conflict of interest. I'll let you decide whether you think that's the case. I think it's a fair question. So when we're looking at the real differences, we're talking about, okay, realtor, agent, why is there a differentiation here? Okay, so a little bit of history. Back in 2000, I think it was 2005 or 6, there was a time where Property Villages was actually part of MLS, and they had their own company. I think it was Sun Central, if I'm not mistaken, and they had their resales and new construction on MLS, and they would make it available for everybody to work with with their agents, and anybody can go in and work with a realtor and buy a property that was being represented by Property Villages. Well, that changed in 05, 06, and they decided they were going to start their own system called the VLS. Now, what's happened is they left the realtor community. Now, as an agent, let's talk about the definition of agent. Agent definition is basically a person who is licensed in the state of Florida and can sell property for commission. It's basically what it means, for money. So in this case, they are licensed by the state of Florida. They are under the umbrella of the DBPR, the Department of Business and Professional Regulation. That's their side. On the MLS side, we are obviously licensed real estate agents, so we are under the umbrella of the DBPR, and we also fall under the umbrella of the National Association of Realtors, NAR, which many people have heard of, and the FAR. The people that work over at Property Villages do not fall under that umbrella. They do not fall. They're not realtors, right? Realtors is a trademark name. Real estate agent is not, right? It's just you're working for a commission. So both sides are licensed. The only difference is, and it's a big difference, we are under the NAR and FAR, Florida Association of Realtors, and we're governed by such, and we have to abide by a certain code of ethics, which we're going to jump into today. We're going to really look at the differences, and I think the biggest differences fall under the National Association of Realtors standard code. So let's take a look. Okay. So essentially what we're seeing here is, and you can pull this up if you can't see it on the screen, it's okay, because you can actually Google this, right? You can actually, it's under cdn.nar.realtor, or you could just Google NAR Code of Ethics, and with a couple of clicks, you can end up there. So, one of the differences, another difference, we'll just say that, is that realtors, when acting as principals in a real estate transactions, they must remain obligated by the duties imposed by the Code of Ethics. So there is a standard that if we don't abide by, we can be turned in and face some fines, obviously, through the Board of Realtors. The Board of Realtors is the local board, and our Board of Realtors is located in Tavares, Greater Lake and Sumter Board, and it is located in Tavares. And if there is ever an issue, we are judged by our peers, And oftentimes this happens. This sometimes typically what typically happens in these kind of cases is if there is some kind of ethical question, a realtor will essentially turn in another realtor because they feel like this particular person didn't represent their clients well or is unfair, and someone was hurt by this. And there are times when realtors will have to go in front of a board of realtors that will talk about an ethics complaint, and it'll be adjudicated within the same umbrella. So there is a watchdog there's a watchdog facility here over realtors in general. So you need to know that. So I think that's a really important thing here. So standard one is we have to act as principals that remain obligated by the duties imposed by the Code of Ethics. The second one is the duties imposed by the Code of Ethics encompass all real estate activities. So this Code of Ethics, NAR's Code of Ethics, is all encompassing. The third one is, and this is a big one, in attempting to secure a listing which shall not deliberately mislead the owner as to market value. This is a rule that we have to abide by. Now, this is something that we as realtors have to abide by, not necessarily, and I'm not saying that they do not ever go by this, but there's no watchdog facility monitoring anyone's, let's say they mislead an owner. Okay, who's going to do something about this? Now, the argument could be made that the DBPR will, but the DBPR is a very large, it's a small organization that covers a large amount of businesses. It's the entire universe of businesses in Florida. So very difficult for them to monitor and watchdog this. We essentially police ourselves with this particular NAR Code of Ethics. So in attempting to secure a listing, we cannot mislead an owner as to market value. The fourth one is when seeking to become a buyer or tenant representative, we shall not mislead buyers or tenants. Okay, so it's on the other side. We can't mislead buyers and we can't mislead sellers, as opposed to what we saw in number 3. Number 4 is dealing with buyers. Number 5 is realtors may represent the seller and buyer in the same transaction only after full disclosure, which means that we would have to make sure that both sides understand where we stand. There's no ambiguity, right? This is where we are. Now, we're also supposed to submit all offers and counteroffers objectively and as quickly as possible, right? So we're not supposed to sit on it for a week when we know we can't have access to the seller or the buyer who's local and they're easy to find. So that's what that deals with. Number 7 is when acting as listing brokers, realtors shall continue to submit to the landlord or seller all offers and counteroffers until closing, unless the seller says, you know what, I want to withhold all offers. Okay. But if the seller is open to seeing all offers, we are supposed to let the owner know that there are other offers out there, unless it's a duty that is released in the listing contract. Number 8, realtors or agents or brokers of buyers shall submit all buyers offers and tenants offers, that type of thing. So now it's on the buyer side. So sellers, we've got to tell the sellers of all the offers. Buyers, we have to present all offers and let them know what's going on. That's basically what all this is saying. Number 9 is the obligation of realtors to preserve confidential information. So if a buyer says certain information about their particular offer and they're willing to go higher in the offer, but they say, you know what, I want you to don't tell the seller this, but we're willing to go up. We just try to get the best deal possible for us. We are obligated to withhold that. And the same on the seller side. Our obligation, if there's something that's going to be sensitive and is going to compromise a particular situation or particular party, then we are supposed to withhold that if that is the wishes of the buyer and seller. If the buyer says, I I do not want you to reveal this. The seller says, I do not want you to reveal this kind of motivation. Then we are obligated to keep secrets is basically what it is, unless it's going to impact another party. So for instance, you've got a situation where the seller knows that there's a sinkhole on the property and says, well, I don't want you to tell the buyer. That's not something we can do, right? That's illegal for us to withhold it. And it could get the seller, and most likely would get the seller, in a heap of problems. So non-disclosure is something that will materially affect the value of the property. Then it's something we have to disclose, right? So you're getting a sense. And if you want the rest of these, you guys can go through the rest of these standards of practice. And there are at minimum 16 of these of things that we have to do to protect the public, right? So we can't lie and cheat and steal, and not to say that anybody does. And in fact, it does happen in the realtor community where people will break these rules all the time. It does happen. However, there is that watchdog organization that we've got, the Board of Realtors, that can guard against that. And it's a way for the public to also address such situations. Now, a lot of times the situations, based on my experience, and I've been doing this for 23 plus years, but broker for realty executives in the villages since 2004. I've seen it where the public sometimes misunderstands what a realtor is supposed to do, and they think that there's some malfeasance, and there really isn't. But sometimes there are some particular cases. Most of the time, when there is an error made, if there's some kind of damage to the public, it's usually made by accident. Doesn't mean it's excusable, but usually it's made by accident. And occasionally we do see, okay, wait a second, you're on a limb here, and you're really stretching it, and you're doing something pretty much illegal. It does happen. And in that moment, we have the opportunity to bring people before the Board of Ethics in our own realtor board. So that's an option. And I think that's a real positive thing. And I think when people really talk about the differences between agent and realtor in the villages, there is a real difference. There's a big difference. And I think the biggest differences are within the NAR Code of Ethics, which I just shared. And then on top of it, the big differences is that we essentially will represent the buyer or seller in our transactions. And we don't have, I'm not saying this happens with Property Villages, but the tendency, the opportunity could be there for some of them to really focus in on new construction as opposed to a resale. And all of what we do is completely focused on resale. So hopefully, if you have questions, leave it in the comments. You guys can also connect with me anytime, 352-572-3796, 352-572-3796. I'm Glenn Stein, Realty Executives. Hope everybody has a great weekend. By the way, it's currently April 23rd for the folks that watch this down the road in 2023. And please like our video and subscribe if you haven't subscribed. That would be absolutely great. Thank you.